Good afternoon. It is 1:01 on September 1st, 2022. Work session of the Board of Supervisors to talk about our space needs assessment. Joe, you want to give us an overview?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. It's kind of a brief what my expectations are from this, and kind of give some guidance to everybody participating with us today. And I think want to thank everybody that's here today, and hope everybody's had a chance to look at the very large document that I provided with everybody. And it is, I understand it's confusing. There's a lot of design rolled into this that really isn't what we're trying to accomplish now. So if everybody could just kind of look at it as a broad overall area, and if you feel that what is in here, each building kind of has a couple of options, and then part of that there's existing square footage, and then kind of what their proposed new square footage would be. Some go up, some go down, some stay the same. Just want to make sure that the total area appropriately represents everybody's need, not necessarily what specific design that they've presented, and in some cases the specific area they might have located you in a building. And then I want to try to start hashing out priority, because as you can see, some of you are tenants, so you're only affected by one location, but we took all of our major buildings into consideration to try and get a long-term plan on some of this. So I'd like to work towards getting first two priorities set today, and then I'm sure there'll be follow-up meetings as we move through this. But my rough estimation, start to finish, if we started today, it might take 10 years to accomplish a lot of this stuff, because some of them have a higher need, and then you just look at the overall cost. I mean, it's a big number if you tried to do everything all in one shot, and just the feasibility of shuffling people around. So total area and priority. That's what I'd like everybody to think about. I'm going to kind of talk about, I'll have Bryce bring up what they call the final concepts document. And just for ease, instead of bouncing around, I was trying to figure out how we could address some of our tenants in the beginning so they didn't have to sit through a whole lot of discussion about areas that don't affect them. But given the complexity of the document and how it's laid out, I'm just going to start at the beginning and just kind of work through and talk broadly about each building. And a lot of it's going to be my opinion, but it kind of gets that discussion going. So, feel free to interject, and some things from, we're about 18 months into this project since it started, and we've already seen areas that the initial discussions have changed, needs are different. So any of those changes, feel free to mention them, because that plays into some areas we have to increase their size because there was unforeseen increases in staffing. So it's just a starting point. I think everybody understand that this is the beginning steps of this long process. So we'll try to move through it as quick as possible.
And if somebody has a question or needs to point something out along the way, do you want them to wait, or do you want them to interrupt?
I think, yeah, I've kicked that around. I suppose if we're in a building in that area, I think it's appropriate to bring it up at the point, because we might get so far away from it, that way we can at least get it down and have a note of it, whether we talk heavily about it at that time, but at least it's there. So yeah, feel free. And if you're, raise your hand if you're on Zoom, feel free to speak up, because I'm going to try to watch both sides. But
I'll do the watching part out here, and Bryce will watch on Zoom, and we'll just try not to descend into too many rabbit holes so we can get through.
Okay. Well, all right, Bryce, you want to go to the next page? We're just going to start here. There's two proposed floor plan options for this building. I'm gonna focus on option one because I think it's the lesser of two evils and easier to kind of navigate it, because I don't agree with a lot of some of the ideas in option two. But I'm gonna I've broken things out with different price points, just to kind of give you an idea. You know, they have the total overall cost at the back. And then I've kind of taken what, you know, after speaking with some of the offices and departments here, realistically, if those proposed changes are really needed or not. And then in this building, we have some areas that we're doing permanent front counter barriers. I'm going to mention that because some of the departments and offices here, that front counter barriers project pretty much takes care of needs that were brought up in the space needs assessment. So they can be kind of checked off as no further work needed. So that directly affects that overall cost for this building. So this one starts in the basement. The big one is since this launched off as environmental health and planning and development are now to independent operations. So we have them separated, and environmental health front counter areas getting addressed in the front counters barriers. So I think down the road, we could better utilize the wing of the basement that they inhabit. But an immediate need, it's probably not high priority, in my opinion. And we could essentially, that wing of the building, rough estimate would be about $320,000 to completely gut that wing and remodel it. And we would take into account, I spoke with both Amelia and Kimberly, that we could still, they could both gain space and still be two independent operations with separate reception areas. IT and facilities management, both of those are in the category of as the permanent front counter barriers are going to accommodate their needs. So there's not really much to do. I mean, there's some in-house work that we will be doing, but for the space needs assessment, I think we can leave them alone. Now, we get into the emergency management and EOC portion of this building. We've kind of agreed that a future good move is moving them to the Human Services Center, but that creates a large domino effect to make that happen. And once that area is vacated, we will have a need in this building, even when we get to that digitizing our permanent files, some of which, even though they're digitized, we have to keep the hard copy. So I think in the future, if we could use that wing of the basement, we could make the offices that need those permanent file storage, but they don't necessarily have to be in their office footprint. They just we have to keep them. That would be a good area of the building to have independent locked storage rooms for each office that needs that. And that would be about a $50,000 project to turn that into basic storage. And then Melissa kind of has a plan, depending on the timeline of the space needs assessment, that she may rework the EOC area and eliminate that corridor because it's not needed for fire egress. We have plenty of egress out of that. Even if she moved forward with that work that would be done, there would be minimal change if we turned that area into storage in the future. So I just wanted to mention that in her kind of, listen here.
Yeah.
You want to talk about, do you have a rough timeline?
All dependent on, my timeline is all dependent on this.
So, but I felt it was worth mentioning. So go ahead.
Just for clarification, so the purple area that you have conference/training, is that what you're also looking at?
Yes.
Training storage?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically that From the restrooms in the gray area back would be that the area I would reference is for, because in it, depending on the total area of storage we would need, there's also probably enough room to incorporate a small conference room or flex space, so to speak, down there as well. But until we really know, we get deeper into the digitizing of files, then we would really have an idea on the size of room that each one of those operations would need.
Are you increasing the number of elevators in this building if you do all this, cutting off the stairwells?
Hadn't planned on.
Well, I'm just saying, we have a lot of employees who use the stairs as opposed to the elevators. And what I'm seeing here is you could potentially be cutting off 2 ways to get
To the basement,
to the
yes.
basement. They only have one stairway to get in or out unless you're in one of those offices, and you could, like, planning and development and
Yeah.
environment and health could use it as egress, but it's no longer ingress for that
Correct.
area.
Mhm.
Ditto with the
Yes.
other ones, so. I have some concern about that because of traffic patterns. Maybe it's just what people are used to.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about getting out of the building in emergency situations. Got excellent egress right now. Just something to think about.
It's all good discussion, yeah. Okay. Go ahead and, thanks, Bryce.
Can you increase the size a little bit, right? Thanks.
All right, this is main floor of this building. Some of the changes they proposed, well, the majority of them on this floor, I felt the cost to accomplish that versus the benefit that we would get out of it was hard to justify. So, and I spoke with everybody on main floor, and the need is not high for what they're proposing. And the major thing was reworking the assessor's front counter area, which just falls into that. We're addressing that with permanent front counters barriers. And then, so that kind of basically makes main floor no major changes.
What about the traffic level for the treasurer's office?
That is one that's come up where that gets complicated is given that the building's built into the side of the hill, to truly get a good flow through there, you need an entrance point and an exit point that are independent from one another. And how you accomplish that without a high level of cost. And then like their front, like what they have shown to increase the lobby size, you're taking up current private offices that are, like Artie's office would not be there anymore. So speaking with Ted, that really, the benefit of having a larger front counter lobby space that still creates a flow issue because, yeah, now it's L-shaped and you can get to the back and have a better line of sight, but then people still have to turn around and walk out the door they came in. So when you have a line queued, because I don't think there's any way to have a lobby large enough to accommodate the amount of people in them busy times like tax time, end of the month, and everybody's got to get in there, get their registrations. You're still going to have that flow is terrible coming in and out of there without having an exit point. But then that gets you into the weird area at grade level, or you do it like it used to be years ago, and it was you walk through the middle. But then that takes up to have like 2 separate counters, one on each side, like it used to be. Then they can go out the stair tower. But still, only a certain number of people are going to go out because we're not going to allow them to come in like they used to be able to. Well, that's a lot of square footage it's going to take up to have a walkway down there. So that was where I personally struggled with the cost versus benefit scenario. Ted's got a different opinion. He's, I've spoke with him about it. He was comfortable with leaving it as is for now.
Okay.
Okay. Top floor. They show a lot of additional overflow in what they call hoteling space. I think that's an excessive amount. Our big thing there is we've got election equipment and election operations that they have to be here. They have to be under that umbrella for the auditor's office, but it's also not something that is used every day, throughout the year. There is some permanent files that in the back area of the auditors that kind of falls in its unfinished space. But there's a large number of files that, they could be digitized. Some have to be permanently kept. But the large volume for the digitizing, that's something that Lucy and her staff has been working on, but it's hard to designate time to do that. So that is something that we would need to consider in the overall plan is digitize, whether it's we budget specifically to accomplish that, because freeing up freeing up space that is currently occupied by documents would help gain space for other operations. Like in this point, getting human resources into their own area and then allow for growth in the board office area. Could be accomplished with their overall kind of idea that's here, but not taking that level of space away from the auditor's office and turning it into, overflow hotel. And then speaking with Wayne and Matt's adjacencies, leaving GIS in its current spot, I feel is they show in this rendition moving that operation across the hall. And to me, I think that we could accomplish the human resources needs in that area where we house election equipment, basically Matt's office over.
Leave GIS where it is.
Leave GIS where it is.
History, John.
Yep.
The overflow hoteling space, is the overflow meant to mean for the public meeting room?
Yes, that they tried to account for. I think that's why they show two big rooms is overflow / hoteling is in those few occasions where we've had a large number of people that wanted to attend a board meeting.
Yeah, and it probably is once a year or less that we have that, but when we do, it's really good to have some space that's ideally on the same floor.
Yeah.
This public meeting room, so that, I kind of like option 2 where it was right across. However, that was, I think, moving the auditor's office, but this doesn't do. I think that's perfectly adequate, but I think we could use a larger conference room on the second floor. So
yeah, and I think
that space would be used.
Yes, I agree, and I think that we could, as we dig deeper into the design aspect and working with the auditor's office, because there's times when they have election workers and they inhabit every square inch of the auditor's office.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we could incorporate that space is part of the auditor's operation, but could be purposed for overflow scenarios, I think we could accomplish that, but without just having these 2 rooms that's what they're for.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at it more of Primarily, most of the time, it's for auditors' operations, but when we get into those scenarios where, okay, we know we got something that's going to drive a lot of people to attend a board meeting, it's available to use as
And
that.
those are normally evening meetings.
Mhm.
anyway.
Yeah, so, Yep.
I think it would be.
yeah. And I think that's when we start digging that deep into it, how do we, because because some of that can be accomplished simply as, this, because a lot of times it's just a room that's large, but, a few times a year, there's 20 people in there, doing election things, but on the times, the space is there, we could put chairs in it, it's got the door that the public can get into. And
It would be similar to the assessor's conference room on the first floor, and
Yeah.
then that one is, I use
Yeah.
it quite a bit.
I think everybody uses that
Everybody
quite a
uses
bit.
it, yeah. So I think if having a good sized conference room on
Yeah.
both first and second floor would be really.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful that now technology, COVID drove, we do these meetings differently than we
Right.
used to. So, you're always going to have the people that want to be here in person for those types of meetings. But I'm hoping that having, Zoom type meetings will take some of that, congestion, that more people will choose to attend at home. Like I said, I'm hopeful. You're always going to have the people that I want to be there in person, because I'm that type of person. I'd rather be,
Depends on the nature.
yeah, it depends on the nature of the meeting,
So if you talk to Barb, so if we would do overflow, we're gonna have a large meeting and folks are using one of the rooms, we're gonna go. What type of IT or electrical setups we're gonna need in those rooms so people can either watch a screen and, see us and know how to, can run public comment or comment on there or.
Not specifically, no. We not related to the space needs assessment. But that is things that those types of costs I've tried to incorporate into the construction costs, because technology is one of that's the MEPT. The T in that is technology. So there's a cost mechanism we use to factor that, to have that availability. So
Okay.
yeah, but that was kind of getting into that design aspect, and I was trying to
Sure.
keep that separation. But yes, it would be taken into consideration
Okay.
if and when we get to that point. So I'm going to kind of give some numbers. Like if we were to move human resources out of the board office area and remodel that area, about 117,000. To finish that area in the auditors that is unfinished now, and to rework what is listed here as overflow hoteling and GIS, because those currently are roughly split in half. It's from the elevator, and they show the gray area is a restroom in there where the elevator is. Kind of that whole area there that right now is election areas. To do that area would be about 170,000. And then if HR vacated the board office area, because we've kind of, we changed it a little bit with, adding an office for Stephanie, and then there, anticipating there would probably a little bit of layout change. That would be about 52,000. That's this building in a nutshell. And I'm going to stop, and anybody who's in this building has input, I think would be a good time to take that in.
You okay to move on then?
Great.
Well, before we move on, I'm gonna call out a couple of people.
Okay.
All right, I'll start since we're on top floor here. Idea on how great the need is to separate board office staff and human resources staff. We got to get to a priority on some of these things. So I'm going to just, anybody who's, if you feel it's an immediate need, moderate, or low need.
Medium. Say more medium.
Okay. Okay. Kimberly up here, is she on the? All right, Amelia, since you're in the back there. How big is the need for you to have more space in your office? No? Okay.
Yeah. With the reconfiguration we've done, I'm kind of projects.
You pretty good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then, low, yeah. All right. Where's Lucy? To get that unfinished area in the back of your office more efficient, what would be your priority?
What kind of priority is it, or?
Yeah, to you. I mean, how do you?
Well, I think it feeds into a larger conversation about what to do with this. My main concern is security, and that's only going to escalate. That's not ever going to go away. So I can't really share space with anybody because either I have to have things permanently wired and secure, and then I have to also securely stored. So to me, it all starts with having those secure bays in the basement, and from there I can, and then also digitizing permanent records. Once we have that, I could I think we could move what I stage now in
Across the
Front
hall,
West
yeah.
into that space, but that's sort of the third step of all that.
Yeah, because you
Or
place to
fourth
put the
Maybe.
files you gotta keep forever, and then the ones that are on that
step.
to be destroyed.
There's a
yeah.
destruction schedule.
Mhm,
there's
yeah. And then digitize, so.
Some things when I digitize, I no longer have to keep the original. But that's really a art question, or I think that's a countywide question. not
Yeah,
just an
I
art
agree.
question.
I think that whole digitizing files is probably gonna fall into its own project in
Mhm.
itself. So.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think at that point, unless I miss somebody, feel free. I've got 400,000 things going through my mind, so.
Tammy, on behalf of the Assessor's Office and GIS, we agree that with Jody has said and appreciate your hard work.
Thanks, Tammy. Okay. We're gonna move on to human services. This one, I didn't piece out a whole lot of it all because a lot of this has changed and is moved around. So, and so much, just moving, like if we chose to move emergency management to EOC, that's the only real operation that's looking to move to this facility. To just accomplish that, it pretty much dominoes the whole rest of the building. And we've got changes in operation since this originally started, and that's CICS and general assistance. The initial conversation, CICS is already brought an additional, Russell Wood is now in that operation, wasn't before. Juvenile Court Services is got a high potential for adding an additional staff and the potential for Scott, I know you, the job title that, Southard's old position that currently isn't there, but could be.
Right.
So,
Current chief is
Yeah.
post retirement. We don't know where that's located from.
so granted, there is still probably more room there than they would utilize in that scenario, but it kind of changes the overall square footage need
Their
for.
reception area is larger than it needs to be.
So there's that. So basically, the moral of the story for this building is to shuffle things around. You're looking at their projected 2.2 to 2.3 mil is probably inaccurate. There's not a lot of piecing it out like I showed in the administration building. So, because no matter what we do, we have to move people around, because there's Department of Human Services, they've been through a couple of different models since this has started. They're currently in a work from home, so there's the potential for reduction in space there, but we don't know exactly how much that is right now, and I haven't spoken with them specifically about that for a couple of months. But to accomplish everything at the Human Services Center, it's going to have to kind of all happen at the same time, which then also brings up we have some spare space there to do some shuffling as we work on different floors, but we'll probably also be in a situation where we'll have to consider leasing office space outside the building to accommodate being able to do some of the construction there. That cost is not shown in that. This is just a construction cost for the facility.
You said their estimate is or is not accurate.
It is accurate.
okay.
Yeah. Their layout, I would put not accurate and probably not the most efficient way, but the total level of changes that would happen there is reflected appropriately in the overall cost. So, because most of the rest of it is design and really sitting down and getting that hard number on the size of each operation. There's enough space in the building with, we've got, like that second floor, there's a lot of poorly utilized space there and extra space that if we reworked it, we could accommodate, I feel, everybody's current need and future growth. So I didn't go through and piece it out like I did this building, because it's just gonna, that building, you figure, building opened in 1998. There really isn't an operation there outside of the attorney's office has grown. Some have drastically reduced, like at one time, Department of Human Services utilized almost 1.5 floors. They were in the basement and all of main floor, and now they've reduced, look at community services, it grown and then got reduced, and and as we move through this, depending on how far out it is, some of the operations might change completely again, as we've seen with mental health and what community services has been like in the last 5-6 years.
So has DHS got staff back in there now?
Yes, they have more staff now than
Last time?
working in that workplace than the first discussions we had with the Department of Human Services.
But
So,
still, they had lots. of
yeah, I mean, they still got a lot of
storage.
that they're not utilizing for space now, but
I would just say that maybe that's an opportunity for not leasing some space. If they're only using half
Yeah,
of the space,
if-
we can remodel that earlier. We have some space left over
yeah,
to move people into while other places are being remodeled.
what we gotta be conscious of doing that is a lot of them operations at that building, they've got like HIPAA rules and regulations, so then that's where it gets, because we gotta keep full separation from some of them operations, and then plus they have to, you know, like DHS, a lot of public interaction, so you gotta have a good front counter area that's easily accessible by the public, you know, so yeah, those are all little, yeah, space wise, we do have enough space to shuffle people around. It's just when you get into the costs associated with being able to co-inhabit certain spaces, it might be more.
I would assume that there's no way to, put in a door. There is a hallway on that first floor, isn't there? Oh, okay. Not like
No,
second
you got
floor.
the
I
front
couldn't remember.
entry and then, well, I mean, there's a tiny little, there's a kind of like a hall behind DHS that goes to the back of DHS and then the facility shop and the stair tower, but there's no hallway to get from one end of the building to the other like there is on the other two floors, so. Yeah, it's,
So what are your suggestions
as far as.
with this building?
With this building, I think overall, moving emergency management and the EOC over there and having them in the basement level. And then I would probably put CICS in the basement level. And then on main floor, I would have general assistance and Department of Human Services. So basically, in the area that says fines recovery and the conference room on the basement floor, I would have general assistance there, but we also need to incorporate the ability for the public to get to emergency management and the EOC, which is the gray, light bluish color.
General
You
assistance?
can't find recovery down there then? No.
I put CICS in the basement with emergency management EOC. And that's
As general assistance?
DHS on the first.
on the first floor.
Okay.
correct. Yeah, I kind of bounced to the next floor, so.
If general assistance and CICS are kind of sharing space right now.
Yes.
Right?
Which they have a MOU that allows that to happen, but we will have to separate them fully at some point.
Oh, we will.
Whether we are mandated to, or it's in the best interest of both operations. I think
Okay.
either way, it would need to. Aaron, Carla, you want to speak on that? Got anything to add?
And we've kind of gone back and forth on separation and that. It's working right now, but it's still, I think it's challenging, just managing the flow of the individuals coming into the office, answering the phone calls and that kind of thing. Because GA, it's a whole separate number, CICS has a separate number. We don't have that backup to the GA phone any longer like we used to with the administrative system. That's not safe.
No, that's a pretty good description.
Yeah, and then, I think it works pretty well now because everybody knows everybody.
Right.
But as time goes on, there's going to be, not everybody's going to be previous coworkers.
Right.
So I think that's going to create tension, just
Yeah.
having them. Because, I'm sure right now you got general assistant staff that comes through the back to use the back door, which nobody has a problem with because they know everybody. But in time, I think that could create problems. And then,
So how would you do the, general assistance in the DHS on first floor where you don't have a back? Both entrances are gonna have to be off.
yeah,
And then you would have two separate entrances then?
Yeah, they would be fully separate, and then
Okay.
in that front lobby area, there's the ability to have two independent, basically,
That's what is in the schematic,
essentially, yeah.
two different.
I mean, in a way, yeah, so kind of, you know,
Is it an option one or
similar
option one?
in nature to, oh, if you go to, Bryce, go to page 121.
Yeah,
Similar in nature to that.
but CICS would instead be general.
Yeah, because speaking with Aaron and Carla, general assistance shares more clients with DHS than CICS, so that's why I felt it was appropriate to pick one over the other to be on first floor. So now that's just kind of rough idea, you know, the overall, you know, square footage that general assistance and Veterans Affairs. We need to include the Veterans Affairs as wherever general assistance is at, Veterans Affairs would be there as well. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of roughly what I figured. That one best represents what I was thinking, you know, and I mean, that's a 850 square foot reduction to DHS's operation. So we would need to dig deeper into if we can appropriately reduce DHS by 850 square feet. Because also with DHS, it's in that back corner, it'd be adjacent to what's listed as storage. That back corner is the rolling file room. And then the other little room that's, if you look just below what's listed as storage, there's a purple room and a gray room. Purple room is their network closet for DHS. So structurally, for their rolling files, we can't relocate them anywhere else in the building, because when the building was built, they took into account the weight of them rolling files. So they kind of have to stay there. The cost to,
Yeah.
none of the rest of the building doesn't have the load rating to accommodate those rolling files. So. And then on top floor, you could probably, next page, Bryce, I think is kind of, we moved fines recovery to where it was directly adjacent to the county attorney's office, but has its own lobby and entrance. But the two operations are connected back at the house. But as far as when clientele come, they go in one door to go for just general county attorney stuff, and then a separate door, which is kind of shown as what is currently juvenile court services front door. But the two operations will be connected back at the house. And then, you know, they show flex hoteling, but I think we need that type of space there. We currently have that. We've got, you know, boost operation, you know. Tim's got some pad grant, is that correct, Tim? Staff that are using an office on the second floor. Yeah, and that would be accounted for in, you know, kind of the moving of fines recovery, so that they're at least kind of adjacent, so they're not, right now they're just kind of in an office.
But not sharing, but not.
Not necessarily
Sharing
sharing, but they would, you know, that'd be a deeper conversation of, you know, do you want them so that they're physically connected, or at least if they're just adjacent, whether it's another separate door to get into it, or how you want that to look, but kind of having them in that general region so that like attorneys' operations are all, and then juvenile court services, you know, in the same basic region that they are, probably shuffling a little bit to the west. This kind of gets real clunky, but it was the only one that was semi close to what I think it could look like. And then have the conference rooms, that kind of stuff, more on the west end.
So if we were gonna pick a color for juvenile court services, which color would it be?
Oh, it would probably be like the maroon that's right next to
Okay.
the orange, probably realistically taking over that area that says break room, storage and conference, that kind of cube that's there. That would probably accommodate roughly their total
Okay,
operational needs. And then, because I think fines recovery, county attorney, when you take into consideration the pad grant office, that probably that area that says boost would be orange, and maybe one of the squares right above the flex hoteling would be orange. I can get up and start pointing at stuff.
it's okay. I just can't see the.
Yeah, this one's where the floor plan is just so out of whack that it's hard to visualize
Oh,
it.
What
gotcha.
happens with the Veterans Affairs and Community Service area, the green area on this map?
Yeah.
On this map?
Well, they would, some of it would be juvenile court services, and then the rest would be, because we also, we got to take account for boost, and then in there as well, and then price and storerooms, same deal, you know, kind of whether it's, we're gonna need some storage there, because we don't right now, and then I think the rest would be like conference room space.
Yeah, because those spaces get used a lot.
Yes, they do.
a
So we
lot.
need to take that into account, but I'm just envisioning them more being towards that west end where the main corridor is, so that you get off that elevator, you got conference room west, and then it would be, those areas are right there, and then you kind of go down the hall to get to the operations that are up
Yeah.
there, so.
So it does leave good space, still leave good conference room space
Yes.
on the second
Mhm.
floor, it's just that we rework it.
Yep,
And the Veterans Affairs and Community Services now go on this.
no,
They don't-
yeah, because they're gonna be down in the basement.
Marriage research would be in the first floor,
What's
right?
that? They were moving
But
versus-
First floor,
Yes, yes,
First floor,
yes.
not
Yeah,
the-
it's that little.
That's right.
It's that break room. It would probably remain there. Well, it has to. I mean, it doesn't have to, but that room also has, it's got some electrical panels. It's going to maintain a mechanical room. And then that would be where we'd have to get into the discussion of, does it have to be physically in the footprint of juvenile court services?
Locked door.
I mean, and that would be, you're off, you guys involved, and then our IT, how that works. Yeah.
Any Zoom questions or comments?
Yeah, so this one kind of comes down to priority of moving the emergency management and EOC out of this building over there. Because as you can see, that's where the domino effect starts. So that would be where that priority lies, and the priority with getting my brain just stopped. Priority of getting separation between general assistance and CICS. And then the rest of it's just kind of cleaning it up since we're doing work.
Mhm.
Because I think as far as the Ames office, we haven't talked about the Justice Center, but doing Justice Center work for the county attorney's office alleviates the congestion that's currently in the Ames office. Is that accurate, Tim?
That's correct. That's our biggest need is in the Justice
So, yeah, so,
So,
yeah.
Does this option show an expanded server room?
Yes, that is, it's shown larger than it currently is in the basement plan. Basically, it would be 3 times the size as it currently is.
Oh, okay.
That's in that plan in the basement. So yes, Barb. Because that is something that, yeah, in that, since we're on it, Barb, where's the priority? Because I know the plan is that's going to be the full backup for the county. Do you have a timeline on when you'd like to see that done?
Well, Joby, as you know, every year at budget time, I ask when we can do this. So I would say as soon as possible. We're pretty limited as to what we can do there. You walk in the door and there's the rack and you can't get behind it without bumping something. You know, if there ever was a catastrophe where we had to use that as our primary data center, we would not be able to do that. We wouldn't be able to have room for all the equipment that would need to go in there. So however that falls within your plans, I would say as soon as possible.
Okay. We can,
Go ahead.
yeah, we can accommodate increasing the server room size. We will have to make some adjustments because right now the wall that it shares with the cubicle area community services is now CICS lease space for their file cabinets. We would have to put up some permanent / temporary walls and give additional space for CICS to accommodate their files. It could be done without costly additions, but
So we could expand the server
we could expand the
room
server room and do nothing else on
immediately.
that floor immediately to address that. And Barb is correct. That room is horrifically undersized for the equipment that's currently in it, let alone adding anything. And we took into account, because we're doing the big HVAC project at that building, I took into account for that, the unit that serves that room, increasing its capacity to accommodate tripling the room in size. So,
And if we did that immediately and did nothing else, is that something that we would then have to undo?
yes. Well, no, not really. The server room is going to have
No.
to stay there at that size. So
Okay.
it would, whatever we do for the server room, then it would be done, and then we just build the rest of it around. So
Okay.
that's why I called it permanent / temporary walls, because, but it would be permanent.
Thanks, Joby.
You bet.
Okay.
And then you've seen Barb's other comments about, yeah, there's a lot more DHS staff that are on site because, you know, they've had to do the phones and get them going and get for them. And yeah, so that operation, you know, from some of their plans that they were trying, you know, COVID, post-COVID, you know, they've gone back to traditional operations. So it's kind of that one's kind of a moving target to to have that specific conversation on site right now. So. But I also feel that we have space on the second floor that if we couldn't accommodate putting general assistance and VA on the main floor, I think we could get them on top floor as well. We just have smaller conference rooms, but it could be done. Or maybe in the basement, and we can talk with Melissa about overall size of, you know, the EOC and emergency management. But I think that there's enough flexibility that we could accommodate if DHS needed to remain the same size that they currently occupy.
One thing I think about HSC and the server rooms on the target. If we were to have a disaster and something happened to this building, it's not just that our IT operations would probably need to be relocated for a while. It's all the operations in this building. And I'm gonna say that conference room space is flexible over there is really something we need to think about in terms of redundancy of administrative operations. So as you, because what I'm sensing is you're gonna be doing some more schematics on this, once you're talking.
Oh, yeah,
about.
this is,
Please think about the redundancy that we need and the advantages that having flexible space over at HSC could help us with if something were to happen to this building.
Yeah. we're gonna talk about that too as we get into the Justice Center, because there's some other stuff that
There's some-
aren't specifically related to the Justice Center, but there's kind of some other things, but we'll get to that. But yeah, because we gotta try to plan for that, so.
Yeah. That's why it's good there's a generator in here, and we also might have to be thinking if something happened at HSC, whether we have to move some of the emergency operations back here. So.
Yeah.
It gets into a whole different level of second use. of
Yes,
Space.
I
kind of
agree.
assessment.
Mhm. Okay. Anybody else have anything more on HSC this week? All right, we're gonna move on to, why don't we go to 127, Bryce? Okay. We'll start with County Attorney's Office. A few years ago, we kind of commandeered some space from court operations. Did some shuffling. County Attorney's Office is occupying all that space that we took, but in a very inefficient manner. So speaking with Tim, because there's a couple of, they suggested putting an addition on. Tim and I both feel that we can accommodate the attorney's overall space needs, utilizing the space that they already inhabit, just making it more user-friendly, I guess. It's very clunky right now, but getting it all under one area, one entrance point, With that, we've had previous renditions of how that could look. They're not reflected here. And at a cost of about $787,000, we'll just call it $800,000. We could remodel that area in that, part of that, there was some discussion of adding an elevator, because there is some, say the facility's not ADA compliant is not accurate, but to say the back of the house for staff in that area of the Justice Center is not ADA compliant, because there was, when it was constructed, there was some elevation issues with the underground plumbing. So they raised the back area of behind the courtrooms there at the Justice Center to accommodate proper fall through the restrooms, which created, there's a lot of steps. Every courtroom's got steps to, so if, you had an employee that had ADA requirements, yes, they can get to the second floor, but you got to go out to the public area of the building down the hall. So that, call it 800,000, would incorporate an elevator to accommodate that. And I feel that you could do that and maintain, because a part of this also is to keep separation between the attorney's operation and the court operation. Because right now they kind of share some hallways back of the house. You should be able to do an elevator that could get both operations, so that county staff and court staff could use it without having to share a lot of space. But that adds about 100,000 to the overall cost. But that's accounted for in the 800,000 would include if there was to be an elevator installed. So
And where would the elevator be?
it was last projected, if you look at that, there's a little door where the blue meets the orange, there's a door that pokes out the side.
That's the current door.
No,
No,
that would
that's
be a
the
door
door
that was
that we
added,
put in
and it's
the
been drawn
elevator.
both ways. It's just a
Okay.
simple entry point for the court system, and it's been drawn up with an elevator there. Now, getting the attorney staff to use that elevator and into the not back of the house, the court, that's where it gets a little bit more expensive, because once you go up, there's no actual county attorney space up there. So there would have to be like a wraparound corridor. It's not the best place for an elevator to be, but I think one could be put in, just not necessarily in that location. But that was the last place, that was the place it was drawn previously. I don't think that's the best place for it, to keep it usable by both operations and maintaining separation. So,
So people on the first floor, just double door elevator, just walk through it.
well, it would be,
Door in addition.
yeah, it would be double doored, but on one side, you know, I suppose they could get in the elevator at the same time. But like if you use the one door, they can only get out a certain door. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and this one, if it went there, and replaces that door, we don't need the second door. You get over here and go out, so it's pass through essentially.
Well, basically what it would be is we would use our access control, which everybody that works at that facility has. So if you fob it with the appropriate, you know, whether it's a badge or a fob, depends on the county staff, most of them have badges. Court staff has fobs. Then it activates the elevator in a certain way. So that will dictate which door opens. It's essentially how we fob. Instead of having two separate elevators, you can use one elevator.
Right, yeah, I get that. It's like it's on the ground floor in the way for somebody to go inside.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you, yeah,
But the elevator wouldn't open up to the outside. You
no,
fob into
there
the
would be like
building.
a
and
foyer,
then
like
there
if
would
it
be the-
wasn't that, you walked in a door, you
Yeah.
walked in another door to go inside the building. And then you want to go upstairs.
Some space has to be used for interior space.
Yeah.
It's not really outside.
Most likely, if we want it available for both operations.
Mhm.
We're gonna move to, we'll just call it the front entry where it's list grand courtroom. Chambers and attendant, and then it shows a little bit of the front entry moving a little south than where its current location is. It's an area of the building, it's courtyard that's not really used now. To me, we don't have an immediate use for an additional courtroom, but I think doing some front entry work, security purposes, just overall, it's a big wasted space. To finish it roughly completely, you're looking at about 1.2 million because of structurally, you know,
To finish it and turn it into a courtroom.
to finish it in finished space, whether it's, because there's another rendition where right now this one shows an addition on the sheriff's office, where the other one, it shows adding that space to the sheriff's operation. Now, my personal thought on that is the sheriff's operation being in that old courtyard area is, it cuts them up. It's not really accessible by the sheriff's office, that whole operation. So I felt, in addition, given the two options for additional space, I felt an addition for the sheriff's office made more sense than putting them in the courtyard.
Mhm.
And then I would say having the courtyard, at least wherever we started there, whether it was with the sheriff's office or the county attorney's office, minimally, we enclose that courtyard and unfinish it for now, but just get it enclosed. And then it could be used for storage for now. And then as the need to grow, like, for example, if we needed to grow the county attorney's office, then we could allocate for any space that we took from the court operation into that front entry courtyard area. But in the initial step, since we can meet the attorney's office needs without taking over more space, that we don't need to necessarily finish that space for now.
So the cost to do a grand courtroom and enclose the former courtyard was what?
1.2 mil.
1.2 million.
Now you could probably do it for, just enclose it, but and do some front entry work. Because if you're going to be in there working, I think we need to address some of the issues with the front entry of that facility and that whole, lobby area that joins the two buildings. It's just a big glass room that we spend a lot of money to heat and cool, basically. So you could probably do it for 300,000 to 400,000. That's if you don't finish anything inside, basically just putting a lid on the top of the courtyard, leaving it until we need it.
Joby, how do you envision the judge, court to access it? No, it's not detailed.
It's not detailed. There's a little bit of, I'm just gonna get up here and go. Pass through the green line. Similar in nature to how the two inner courtrooms on both floors are connected. It would be an access control, because there is inmates that go through it, but that would connect back of the house, the full court operation on that floor. And like right now, they're, to get from one side to the other between 1A and 1B, you got to go through the courtroom. So
Judge on the second floor, about an elevator. That makes sense. To go into that detail of it, and then secure access to jail and community active as well. Those would be class A, class B. That was probably.
yeah, like if that's that courtroom was used for, instead of having, we could probably shift like the attendant chambers to this side. Same similar nature that they can bring them in the courtroom itself without taking them through non-courtroom areas. And then, part of this, we have an IT staff there at the Justice Center. And as we looked, it's shown here roughly. The intention would be, that's included in some costs. If we did this, there would be a door, sidewalk, or equipment in. Work on, because that was Noah's big thing. He has that access where he's currently located. And that would put him at ground level and kind of that side entrance, so he doesn't have to drag stuff through.
That would be an actual office.
Yeah. Yeah. And we threw in a conference room there too, just quick.
Are you referring to that little purple? Is there,
No, to
No.
the, below
because when
that.
you're standing, is the other
Yeah,
way, so I
I'll
got
check
it to
the-
rear, right?
This is an existing conference room.
Okay.
It's what they call a fishbowl. It's like one glass one.
Sure.
This is, right now,
Oh, back there, okay,
there's workstations that sit here.
right.
And then, so yeah, there'd be a conference room with like a door here. And then there'd be
Okay,
this whole wall here is, you can kind of see them, those are windows.
right.
So structurally, provisions are there to put like a door in that wall.
So you put the door into the clerk's office, not into the IT office, so that
Either or.
anybody could use it. Could be.
It could be, yeah. I mean, it could be just
Okay,
outside, you know, but
Yeah.
somewhere in there. Like I said, there's like 10 windows that are along that wall. So pretty much you got like 40 feet of wall that you can put a door anywhere in there. So
and where is IT right now on this?
eh, roughly right here about.
Okay, so you're showing that already being absorbed in the county attorney's office?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
part of where Noah is currently at is this corridor here. This is the jury room.
Gotcha.
His office is right on the other side of the jury room. So you got a frame of reference. It's like right here.
Okay.
We made a temporary office.
So we'll pick the witness.
Yeah, and then Noah's the next one, so.
So by moving IT over there, you're taking.
Sorry, Barb, I touched the screen.
You're taking into account the need to have the exterior entry plus.
Yeah.
Getting a little bit of additional space there.
Yep.
For the county attorney's office.
Mhm.
Plus probably the elevator. Good, it's that easy to put a door in there.
Yeah, and see, and we also have that benefit on that back wall too, because there's long windows that go along there. So structurally, once again, the weight bearing, we can pretty much make that penetration anywhere in the footprint of those windows. So that greatly reduces the cost to put a doorway, an exterior door in the building. You can take care of it where there's a bank of windows. So,
And the 800,000, does that then include the addition for the sheriff's office, or is that a separate
No.
number now?
the 800,000 is just basically what you see in orange.
Okay.
And
Oh, okay.
and the provisions in the clerk of court's office to
Okay.
relocate their IT person and maybe
Okay.
add a conference room. So that's that. All right. I was going to swing on to the sheriff's office. If somebody else has any.
Did the 1.2 million include the entryway, that place that we keep so much?
Yep.
Okay.
You know, like
All of
it
that.
just,
All that central
yeah, the
area.
1.2 million is roughly what you see on the screen, because
Okay.
the sets of doors are a little bit further south in this drawing than what they actually are. And you can see it's like adding a conference room, you know, and they show some video conference rooms for the jail, but I don't think that would be the appropriate location. But I mean, you know, that's one of those other, don't get too caught up in what they show for it to look like. But that is, if you finish that whole footprint, that would be what the cost would be. And as you can see, that opens it up so that, you know, right now, because in its original design, that front entry foyer, call it, didn't exist. There was two separate entrances. Well, technically three, one for the jail, one for the sheriff's office, and then the courthouse. So there's a bank of doors from that foyer into the courthouse, which if you finish that and use that space more appropriately, we probably pull them out. We've left them because that little entry area is inefficient as far as energy standpoint. So we don't condition it at the level as the rest of the building because of its design. So we've kept them doors so that we didn't have, you know, hot and or cold air migrating into the courthouse.
And you're really expanding the courts area into that, you know, the court, you know, that area, the courtyard. So
Yeah,
probably having the doors there doesn't make
Yeah.
sense anymore, just in terms of.
yeah, exactly.
separating space.
So, you know, we'd have to do a little bit different because like they show here, like it wouldn't really work because they've cut off the public entrance into the jail, which that wouldn't work because they use that after hours. So we can't have them going through the sheriff's lobby and then into the jail. So we'd have to account for maintaining that separate jail lobby entrance. But you kind of get the gist of it, that, you know, that was one of them things that it was real clunky how they drew it up, so.
Yeah.
But that 1.2 mil would include finishing that area to a inhabitable level, whatever we do with it is to be
Right.
determined, but that would.
And for right now, we can just enclose it.
Yeah,
And-
and it would cost less, you know, address some of the front entry, but we could just, you know, get it enclosed so that it's not an eyesore, and it could be used as storage until if the time comes that we need to finish it, which we all know that that's probably going to happen down the road, so.
Okay.
All right,
I have a question on a large conference room. Wow, by the courtroom.
I don't believe so, no.
I'm curious what space. Courtroom, hallway.
I think they just shown them, because we all know that they're not square rooms.
Right.
So no, like I said, that's one of them. They didn't accurately depict the rooms, so.
I don't know what the goal is.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, but unfortunately, the only real way to do that is to take over the actual courtroom space, and I don't think that's ideal. I think that was kind of, you know, if we could get some sort of here, that would allow for what the intended purpose of those little meeting rooms were out together. It'd be nice if they were directly by the courtrooms, but because we can't go any further east where all that glass is, because we've already at setback from the property line.
So Joby,
You guys have to show us that.
Unfortunately, no. The city of Nevada does.
remind me when the Justice Center was built.
It opened for business in 2002.
And Human Services in 1998, and this
Mhm.
building was 1960.
6 originally, and then in 80 something we did the addition, and then we remodeled it starting in 2004. Well, we pretty much wrapped up remodeling in 04. We started remodeling it in 2002. So
Thank you.
okay. Move along. Okay. Sheriff's Office, you can see. Yep, stay right there. That's you can see that addition would be 4.4 million. Put that addition on. A lot of that's got to do with because just type of construction of that. So
4.4.
yes, 4.4. Now, side project to this, that's it's on our CIP is an FY24 project, was range grounds improvements and range house. That is not a part of this space needs assessment specifically, but we have done that. We've got some preliminary drawings, and we tried to take into account not just a range house in the traditional aspect. We tried to incorporate the storm shelter in it for like IRVM and anybody that's out there, and an overall training facility. The sheriff's office has, you know, combat training, lots of different training that they do that they don't really have a spot to do it right. And it's got a price of 2.5 mil, and that's kind of, it's a multi-use facility that could be used for county purposes and other law enforcement agencies. Now, I'll probably let Sheriff talk about this because I'm unsure of any of that space that we are using for training was incorporated into this addition or not, or if they're two separate.
as I understand, Joe, they're two separate things. We looked at the range, construction out there we were doing, and that was where I think 2.5 came in. And then anything away from that, back to the Justice Center, that the sheriff's office here would be stand on its own.
Staying on this, okay, yes. We'll talk more about the range house when we get into CIP discussions. I figured I'd bring it up, and it is because there's some improvements we got to do to the grounds out there as well. Some lighting, some stormwater runoff, and that kind of stuff. And then the current facility is very small and very old. It's the old slaughterhouse from the old farm operation. So, and we tried to incorporate other needs too. So that's where it kind of morphed into a training facility that could be used for lots of different operations, but we don't need to get too deep into that. But big thing with the addition for the sheriff's office is you can see they got a pretty big need for, they use drones a lot now. The drones are big. Right now, they don't really have the room. And then briefing rooms, you know. So
The 4.4 million is for what part of this?
just this,
The things labeled drone uniform and briefing?
sheriff can probably speak better of it. But it's basically this.
What's that, a square foot?
Overall, it's about $106.93 a square foot.
I guess I'm not understanding a difference. I'm looking at the center of this, I'm looking at the grand courtroom
Scale?
and all of that. Huh?
Yeah, is it to scale?
It's probably, I don't think it is to scale, so to speak.
I'm seeing 1.2 million there. I'm seeing about 800,000 for the county to remodel. Granted, that's not adding anything on.
It's also,
4.4. I'm just wondering why it's.
okay, well, the 800,000 is a remodel. There's no structural component really to it.
Sure, got that.
The infill is, there's nothing there. So it could be, it's larger, there's more square feet, but it's already got 3 exterior walls that
More
are
like remodeled
existing.
than a
Yeah.
new addition.
You get in the sheriff's office,
Okay,
it's a
yeah.
different type of construction because of the type of facility it is. So it's precast concrete, brick. So it's not just the same cost to.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen it now.
Mhm.
There's no plumbing in it that I'm seeing,
Well,
or,
mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and technology is incorporated in it. They didn't really show
they
a
didn't.
whole lot of detail in this. So
Okay.
I'm not saying that there will or will not be plumbing in there, because there's also a need for showers for,
Yeah.
you know, jail staff, sheriff's staff. They show them on their drawing where the public restrooms are for people going to the jail lobby, which is not an appropriate, you see them?
Yeah.
Right now,
Shower
that's
over
the
there.
public restrooms for the jail lobby, but the showers can't be there. So they got to be accounted for. So there most likely will be plumbing.
Okay. Okay.
With a price tag for that space.
Like I said, a lot of that's
Seems
got
like
to,
an awfully big
a
price
lot of
tag
that's for
space.
that is because of the type of construction. And you got to basically build.
You're matching what the outside of the building is now.
Yeah.
You're not just adding on.
Yeah,
So
where the
now-
others, there's no, the exterior walls, even in the infill already exist.
Mhm.
Where here you gotta put footings, the whole, you know, and precast, because that's what the facility currently is. It's precast concrete with brick veneer. Okay. We'll move upstairs. Should be the next page. Scroll down a little bit, Bryce. It's that bottom left hand, it's the right hand drawing, bottom left hand corner. It's what is currently the law library. And it's conference room slash deposition rooms, which is kind of what was discussed, but it's repurposing it. A little offshoot, you'll see the door, it's behind the elevator. That's a, county attorney has files in there. That will remain, but it's repurposing the law library, and the cost to repurpose that space is included in the $800,000 for the county attorney remodel. Because that's when we started discussing this and going down the design path about 2.5 years ago, that those areas were included in that project. So I just left them there because that's kind of it's a utilized room, just not a whole lot for what its original purpose was. So that's appropriate because there's a need for conference space and deposition rooms, you know. And then once again, they shown squaring off the meeting rooms by the courtrooms, but I don't think that, like I said, the only way to accomplish that is to take over more courtroom space, which I think we would say that the yeah, that would be if we chose to, we could put the courtyard and fill it 2 stories. No, well, the footings, according to the original building, they should be adequate to be able to 2-story it, but some of the discovery, we question that. So I didn't want to include it because it's also one of them. If the decision was made to enclose it, then we would investigate it further whether or not it would make sense to 2-story it. Granted, it would cost more. So I was looking at economics of what is the need to have 2 stories there in the long run. So to justify the cost.
Probably comments and it's only courses. Gone down since 2011.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you
Our court costs have decreased since 2011. Decriminalization. Sometimes. And it's not just.
And the possibility of adding the grand courtroom. Why would you need more?
I think the issue is when Story County has a lot of Class A felonies or murder cases, and I was talking to Tim a few minutes before we started about how it's really cramped for them, and the courts have been trying to do a big high profile case upstairs because of the grocery store.
Well, particularly at the beginning of trial, when you bring in a jury, there's no room for the public. This room, as you know, is a grand courtroom that's actually bigger than they put in the new building.
It's picking the jury decision. Well, the only reason I think that made to report is in our initial meeting with architects, they asked us, ideally, what would you want? That's where it came up. Obviously, we've gotten by 20 years out of it.
Well, here's a thought. When we were talking about this building, about using another conference room and being able to, have IT do something so things can be viewed and almost have a, if we have an overflow crowd, could you do the same thing with the grand courtroom if you really needed a little more space? Have some IT have wired in for some of the other courtrooms to have audio and video.
We've done some of that. We used 1C for that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
floor.
So we do have that, so that option is there, and I guess we have something that can be used, you know, more multi-purpose.
That's the courtroom that kind of turned out.
Pardon?
1C is the courtroom. It's not part of the courtroom.
Oh, okay, never mind then. But you can do it with other courtrooms, is what I'm saying, you can do it with a conference room. You know, without saying we have to have a courtroom that's big enough for something that's gonna happen once every other year, or once every, or twice a year, or something like that.
Happening a little more often.
It's big more often than that.
Yeah.
That's been there.
But still,
That issue's not gonna go anytime soon as Beam's storytelling grows. Necessarily, those kind of incidents happen.
Could you show me where the elevator, if there was the second elevator, would show up?
I mean,
You're getting your steps in up and down.
Yeah, I hear you. No, in the last time we made that rendition, it was, came in here, where it gets, but in that rendition, it wasn't. So essentially, to make it dual use, you have to have a corridor wrap around the building, which doesn't make sense. So if you want to dual use, it's going to have to be somewhere. Primarily, probably here, then you run into taking court space. So
Can't go next to it.
it can, but once again, like this area here, you can't alter the footprint because of setback. This corner of the building, since the plus part of it runs in the horseshoe. But it's built, they allow this because it's a fire entrance. It's changed a little bit, but in here, it makes it complicated because we're right on the property line, where we can be on the property line. So that's why it was drawn in the back, because when the initial request came in, it's a corporate. But then it comes up to, you're gonna do something like that, you best make it available for everybody. The need could arise in the county attorney's office as well as the court operation, but that's where to get them, because there's no area on the second floor the attorneys would need to be, because it's back in the house for the court operation, so you gotta get them to the public part of the second floor, so.
I don't think we're making that request now.
Okay. But it was brought up, so we tried to incorporate it so that it's accounted for in the overall balance.
Like ideally.
Yeah, I mean, that's how this kind of like perfect world, blank check scenario, what would you like, you know?
But an elevator is not part of your request now? Did I just hear you say that?
Yeah, I mean, that request was made without our input or.
No, it was brought up, but if we're gonna lose some space in areas where we can't afford to lose it.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay,
That's why here's application.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's where it gets complicated, where you put it. And keep it, because it's intended as to give that access with privacy
sure.
and security
Right,
in
right, right.
question, so that really limits where it can go.
Mhm. Right. Okay.
So yeah, we went through second floor, okay. We're gonna talk about it at this facility, it was part of this, but his storage was also equipment storage for, facilities management, sheriff's office, IRVM for equipment, like, you know, because like IRVM and facilities management, we use a facility at the 4-H grounds that we currently can access about 10 out of the 12 months out of a year. We have to move it for the fair and Lincoln Highway days. We generally just pull everything out and don't put it back in until both things are done. So it's usually they happen in about a month, but we have had it where we've had to keep it out about 5-6 weeks. So the location is less than ideal for IRB because they have to bring it clear into town. The location for facilities management is good. It takes about 2 days to clear it out, and we got to move it and put it back in about 2 days. But bringing it up at the Justice Center because the sheriff's got a large amount of equipment. It's spread out all over the county. He's got some in Gilbert. I'm not going to list all of them, but he's got a couple of days. He's got some that he uses emergency management storage facility with, and having it centrally located in either adjacent or on the property of the Justice Center is ideal. For us, our storage being in Nevada is critical to our operation because we've had it out at the old care facility before, and there's a lot of different things. Having it in Ames is less than ideal. I think IRVMs, they used to have a pole building out there. It was the year, I think it was the summer before the derecho, the summer before that, wind blew it down. It's been removed and essentially never replaced. So I think appropriate. I don't have a cost with that because I didn't, because it's just, it could go so many different ways. But I think IRVM needs their own storage, pole building out the old care facility right next to where the rest of their operation is. Now for the sheriff and us, we could co-locate. There is room on the property of the Justice Center to do that. It kind of locks us in for any growth to the north. We were limited anyways because of the well field, but we could incorporate storage there and additional, because part of this too, which is included in the 800,000 for county attorney, is additional parking in the back for the attorney's staff to use, because right now they park out in the public. There's a section dedicated for the courts, but this will be additional to that. Or right now, I'm investigating the Mosaic building that is right next to it. I've heard through the grapevine that they're going to be selling it. Now, I'm working with Leanne because she has a point of contact, but I've also, which comes to shove, that would be ideal because it joins with the Justice Center parking lot and we could put that in there. But you're looking at, for storage for our equipment, the sheriff's equipment, part of that would have to be conditioned space, because there's also dive team equipment that is critical that it stays at a certain humidity level and temperature, because it's a lot of it's rubber, it's got seals. So a portion of it would have to be climate controlled, not just heated or dry. But looking at around 300,000 to accommodate the square footage that the sheriff needs and we would need if we built something on the property of the Justice Center. I don't want to speculate on what the cost of the Mosaic building, which is larger than what we need it to be, but we could also use it for various other things like a lay down area. And if the Mosaic, because another thing that the sheriff currently spends money on is when they impound a vehicle. Last I was aware, you have an agreement with CIT, is that correct?
I'm sorry.
When you impound vehicles, you use CIT to house those vehicles. Is that accurate?
Usually, well,
Okay.
whoever the towing company is, that's usually who will store, that's usually CITs.
Okay. All right. Well, like the Mosaic building has enough property that we could incorporate impound yard in it as well.
So why would we do that? What's not working now?
Well, it's a cost
It's cost.
to impound it and they're spread out.
It's also a cost to building a building.
Correct.
So what's the offset?
Well,
I don't know.
well, the thing is, building the new building, we couldn't account, we don't have the room to account for you know, impound yard. But I was just saying, if the Mosaic building was within reasonable cost and comparable to building one, it is larger and it would have provisions for an impound yard and other uses.
So you're just pointing
I'm
out
just pointing out that it
additional
could
uses.
be. I don't want to throw a number out there because I have not spoken with anybody from Mosaic.
So
But
does the 300,000 square feet does not include impounded vehicles?
no,
would be an
that would
outside.
just be a building just large enough to house our equipment.
What's facility management have in storage?
We've got 2 dump trailers, 2 enclosed trailers, flatbed trailer, all of our snow removal equipment, plows, tractors. It's out at 4-H. We can fit it all in about 4,000 square feet. 6,000 square feet is ideal because then we can put the trailers in a fashion that we don't have to move 2 things to get to the piece of equipment that we want.
So how do we get from 6,000 square feet to 300?
300 what?
And $300,000 to build the
Build
square
the-
footage that we would need.
Need.
Yeah, how many square feet do we need there?
I don't have that exact number with me. It's on a different.
And that's all in a, yeah. That's, none of that is included in what we've got here.
No, but it was one of the pieces that's kind of lacking in their overall report, but it was supposed to be included in the space needs assessment was equipment storage. They kind of mention it, but they don't really depict it and kind of give any real cost associated with it, but I wanted to bring it up because it is part of this and it is a need. And it isn't, to me, it's an immediate need, you know, for
And you said that 800,000 included some additional parking in the
Parking,
back,
yes.
but what your thought is for additional storage, that space where that parking would be, is that where you're thinking that?
But the parking could still be there and it would be like an L-shaped building. And then it would use the parking area that
Gotcha.
is for the county attorneys, but it would be able to be accessible for us and the sheriff's office.
Gotcha. Okay. Moving on.
But it would be roughly around probably 14,000 square feet total,
Roughly.
roughly.
That's what.
And some of that cost is, because some of it would have to be, you know, because there's some of the sheriff's equipment is tall, so it would be over height. So it's the cost
There
per
you go,
square foot.
complicating things again.
Well, I mean,
It's complicated a little more.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Complicate away. I'm just gonna invite him up to complicate it, Joe.
yeah, as well. We're on it. Let's talk about it.
Just quick, a few things I'd like to mention. As we look at the plans here, I agree with Joby. Option 2 is what we would prefer. However, in the drawings where inmate visitation is, that's just been taken out. And the video conference room has been taken out and put down just south of the lobby. And so if an inmate has to use that, we got to take the inmate out of the secured confines of the jail through the public library. And when we built the Justice Center, conceived it in 1999 and moved in 2002, that's why we had what we call the Green Mile we refer to. So no inmates will be out in the public and do that. We've got to have the face-to-face visitation, and I don't know why that was moved out. Video conferencing has to stay right there in that same area. So
Yeah, that falls, they did a lot of schematical things that make
Yeah.
absolutely no sense. That's
No.
why,
And that's one.
my big thing is what they kind of show for overall, is that large enough to meet? Because, yeah, I mean, like here, they took out the visitation and made the gym larger. And I'm not sure why they even made that decision, because I don't think,
Unless we're gonna start having basketball teams or something.
yeah, I don't know. I don't think there was ever discussed that the gym was too small in the gym.
Yeah,
So I think,
I don't think that's an issue whatsoever, but we've got to maintain our visitation the way it is now, which includes video conferencing. When we were talking, look at the briefing, what is the open office space here? I don't know what that is.
I don't know either. That's why I don't want to get caught up.
Yeah.
This isn't the design part of it. So
Okay,
anything they've drawn, I just ignore it, because all we're looking at is total overall area that you need to, does it fit your need?
okay.
What it looks like, that's to be determined when we get to that point to actually
Okay.
build the stuff.
When we designed the Justice Center initially in the beginning, we had lockers, showers, and a workout area. And to come in under budget, they were removed from the diagram. And what we'd like to do is have 2 locker rooms, 1 male, 1 female, for our staff and employees, which would include showers, and then a workout area for the officers as well.
So did you tell our consultant staff?
We had talked about the showers and things like that. Now, the workout room, that's new, but looking at lockers and things like that. Joby can look at that and see. And then you pointed out the same thing with the wall going south. Why would we bring it up to here?
Yeah,
So,
why they offset it, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna do it, it's not gonna be that much more
yep,
costly to meet bring it out to the front of the
okay.
current footprint.
And then the last question I would have is, in one of the writings, they had relocate state IT personnel to the clerk of court's office. We worked with the board for some time to get an IT person situated in the sheriff's office, and he also assists courts and things like this. But is this moving the IT person?
No, this is
different.
Noah
This is
from,
different.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
from the, yeah.
Mute point then.
Yeah.
And Connie, is there anything else I'm? Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
So, okay,
All right, so just so we're clear, Sheriff, you would prefer, because what you've got drawn here, that's visualizes about 2.5 times more square footage than what's shown on that drawing.
Okay.
Is that?
well, I'm not an architect, so I can't. make
Yeah,
that-
but I'm just going off of, where you brought
Well,
it.
where it goes, I don't know. We just have to
Okay,
see.
but you would like workout room and lockers and showers.
Yes,
Okay.
and the showers here,
Yeah,
I
that
just leave that the way it is as restrooms.
restrooms, yeah, that,
Expecting employees to shower in a public area,
okay.
so.
All right, while you're sitting here, how high a priority is it for you?
Are you separating these two things? This has always been a priority, but it's never really been attainable. The space that we have, we already talked about how we have equipment all over the county. We still have equipment, or not equipment, but records and files that we're renting space in the old hotel
Mhm.
across from the admin building because we have no place to store it out at the Justice Center. And as we continue to expand, everything keeps getting crowded in to a place. Another question I did have is in the lobby here. Sergeant Quinn's office is right here and it's just gone. Where is
Yeah.
did they relocate Sergeant Quinn's office?
No, like I said, that is one of them. I think they changed your lobby area because of how they envisioned this grand courtroom, but that's why we talked about it, and that's where they cut off having public access into the jail So essentially how they've drawn it is for that public, when they come in on the weekends or for visitation or to bail somebody out, they'd have to go through your lobby, which makes no sense either.
And this lobby's closed on the weekends. and all that
Exactly.
share
So I mean,
sausage.
we have to maintain,
Yeah.
so that footprint and how it looks now, I don't anticipate that changing.
Okay,
It would, anything that happens in this front entry courtyard area would not affect. We would make sure that access to how it is now to your office and the sheriff, I mean, the jail waiting area would
Yes.
remain the same.
Yes.
So,
and as we look at the training room, originally the training room worked well, but as we continue to support the county and the other areas and our own needs, it keeps getting smaller and smaller, it seems. So having a briefing / training room, basically, it's gonna be the training area, that is a high priority. The uniform storage is a high priority because we're just no
Yeah.
space.
yeah, and I think like in our initial talks, one of the reasons, because, the current, you call it squad room, which is what they're showing open office area. We're gonna have, because there's a need for the armory to be larger. Because that was part of our initial discussions. Well, to make it larger, we got to take up even more of that squad room. So then that was
Why the briefing,
why the briefing room was moved out there. And see, I think they don't really show increasing the size. I mean, they do, but they take over your deputies' writing station.
well, the deputies' writing stations.
But then that's the mail room there that they show eliminating to make the armory bigger, which also doesn't make sense. So,
we'll keep doing some more talking on this.
like I said, that gets into that whole design, which we want to, if you feel you need more overall space on that addition, then that's where we need to talk about how it looks on the inside. That's when we get to the point where
the briefing and training room, by making that, that little bit larger, like we talked about here, we also are open to sharing with the county for the things that you guys have for training, if you need a space that is that size. So that's also something that could be considered as well. Any other questions?
Also put in the gym, can we come use it too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, we'll have male and female lockers, so you build this and we can put your own lockers out there.
all right.
Okay, anything else?
Okay.
I think we're good for now.
Okay,
All
All
right.
right,
thank you,
thanks.
Julie.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Paul.
board.
Okay. I think we've got through the Justice Center.
I think so.
I
Any
think
other
so.
Justice Center questions? No? All right.
Okay. All right. I'm going to rely on Mike on this one because this has changed. Mike, you want to pop up here? Because this is based off of very early conversations. I know that you've looked at other things to do with the Conservation Center. So figured I didn't do a whole lot with this because there's been hired some land, but I don't know if you can utilize it in the way we kind of thought in the beginning. So I figured I just have you hang out with it. If you're cool with that. Sure. Because as you can see, we kind of got they've drawn up a couple of different options. Putting an addition on with a basement, and then another one where they kind of look at building a separate building adjacent to the Conservation Center for offices. And then I'd heard through the grapevine you were entertaining a new building out at that location as well. Is that true?
Well, I guess let me back up. As you know, right now that building, we've got 11 people officed in a building that's designed for 4. And so right now we've got staff members in different locations, one of which is partially due to a full facility here. That's on the internal operations side. On the programmatic side, we're pretty limited in that we don't have indoor space, as much indoor space as what we see need for programs. So for classroom programs, namely, but also for larger public programs. So those were I guess, the two big factors that playing into this. And then there's a third factor that what does the Conservation Board want or need for program space? So we've got those three factors. I think that this plan addresses two of those factors. And that is the internal component and the existing programmatic component. That makes sense? And so, I think that this obviously, as Joby said, speaks to two options, one being an addition onto the existing facility, and then the second one being a standalone facility to come. Process and across the road from McFarland Park. And that we went through a planning process on how we were going to use that facility or that land. And that came back and we did consider building capacity at that point. And the final land use plan does not have a building imprint there, based on lots of different factors. So we're really not looking at that facility for a building, rather to utilize the existing impacted footprint, if you will, at McFarland for what the future building needs are. So to address the third factor, and that is how the Conservation Board sees moving forward on a programmatic standpoint. When this building was built, in 91, I believe,
Yes.
when this building was built, the philosophy at the board level was to really not have people, i.e. visitors, spend a lot of time in that building, but to get them out right away. To use the building as a gateway and to get folks outside. And, we recognize, and even on the board, there's different philosophies about that. Some still maintain that philosophy, and some have a different philosophy of, we know that we can accommodate for more different types of users and use experiences if we allow for some more programmatic indoor space at the same time. So we can interpret different things, we can accomplish different things with our educational goals and not compromise the desire to get people outside still. So it's couple different schools of thought there. So we are in the process of engaging with a firm to do some master planning for the Conservation Center that will address kind of the programmatic side. And so their plan will take what's been done here and feed, if you will, the planning process at that level. So I think that's how, I guess, we see it, some of the considerations that conservation has and what we do with the footprint.
So are you kind of saying, like, and I don't mean to interrupt you, that it would be kind of premature for us to kind of look at this right now, so you've done a bit more programming side?
Yeah, I would say that this does a pretty good job of, again, addressing those first two of those three consideration areas. But we're not ready to address that third one yet. And so, yeah, in an ideal world, those components are in concert. the programmatic piece in addition with these other two pieces. And so, yeah, I would say maybe, I don't know if premature is the right word. I think they need to happen together. But, you know, those are some considerations that we have. As far as what this lays out for current use and for classroom programming, my only real question would be, you know, I think we need to accommodate the classrooms that this plan identifies, but then we need to accommodate larger room space too. So I wouldn't want to sacrifice large room space for classrooms. And I know, you know, maybe you look at a space that's configurable. I don't know. But that's one consideration that I think we have with this. Any questions on that?
How long will it take to get your other study done?
I believe we said we have an end of February completion date on that.
That's, yeah.
It's probably a little ambitious. So, but that's, I think that's what we've got in the plan. It's either February, March.
I think that could work, you know, yeah, like Mike said, it's a good example of solving two issues they got. So, I mean, that gives us some rough numbers to look at, knowing that that could change depending on what we find, hopefully in February. So, I mean, I think this kind of gives us enough to go off of for this planning piece to this, kind of setting some priority, you know, taking into consideration, you know, that programming third piece, Mike. The other two, you know, issues that you have, which we know the staffing issue is kind of a big one right now, as you pointed out. You got 11 people working out of a space that was intended for 4 people to work out of. So priority wise, understanding that this is only looking at 2 of the 3 major components for that facility. Priority for overall operation, where would you put that?
The staffing component?
Yeah, the staffing and the classroom type, you know, what this addresses.
I guess I hesitate to pull priorities apart because we're only going to get one chance to do what we want for the next several decades here, probably. So
I can understand that. I'm just asking it so we're all on the same page, that it's probably best to wait until we have that third piece and know what direction that's going to go before we start saying we need to address this.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm glad we're having this conversation now.
That's why I kind of saved this one, and you know, it was like, been a lot going on. I was hoping to give Mike a little bit more heads up that this is where the direction I was going to take it when it come to this, but I know he's always prepared. So we can punt. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. We'll punt for right now. I mean, but we know that 2/3 of it are looking decent, and then we got enough numbers to put with it, so we kind of know we're looking at for some costs, and then when we get that third piece to it, then we know for sure what direction.
It's good to have that February, March.
Yeah, 'cause it just shows that, you know, this thing's going to be moving as we go through all of it in every building. It's just how much has changed from the initial discussions to where we're sitting here today, and that's been 18 months. So that's always, you know, so all this is, you know, trying to get a rough timeline, priority schedule, but knowing that that could change at any moment.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you. Thank you.
We're after 3:00, which is when we told. meeting ending.
So
Where we.
we got engineers and animal control, which they will be very quick.
Okay.
So I think animal control's the next one up. This is basically, not much is gonna happen here. Everything in here, essentially, like right now in the, because key points, it says remodel the entry and office space to become more efficient and inviting. Minor remodeling of animal holding areas to allow for views into the rooms via the lobby. And then remodel the restroom to be ADA. We're gonna get into the ADA thing. It's mentioned a lot in here when I'm gonna wrap that up with the ADA. Basically, the permanent front counters barrier project is taking care of the front counter and then the more efficient office space. And then Anna and I got a plan moving forward with animal viewing rooms that will just handle normal budget operation work that facilities management's going to do. The ADA restroom is for this building. It's I'm not gonna say it's a non-issue. It's an easily corrected issue. So as far as animal control and space needs assessment, there's nothing to fit into it. So engineers building, I haven't gotten into heavy detail with Darren about this. We've talked about the key points. They did some major flip-flopping with engineers staff, swap them with IRVM staff. Not sure why they made that recommendation. Nobody can, so that's basically not going to happen. They mentioned some insulation deficiencies in there. My recommendation is we're going to do some thermal imaging of the facilities and see where those are.
Okay.
And then there is some ADA issues in the restrooms when you look at it, when it was built versus current standards. That, to sum it up, engineers building, I think Darren and I can work together and remedy the issues that are suggested in here outside of the space needs assessment. I'm not sure if Darren's here or on. He can correct me if I'm wrong, but okay. But that's kind of the plan for that one. So that wraps up the engineers building. That brings us to, as you've seen, if you've read through this, ADA comes up a lot. Main thing with that is it's not, don't look at it as like we don't have any ADA facilities in any of our buildings. We do. In 2018, ADA regulations changed. Primarily, the two key things that changed in that was turning radius at sinks and toilets that have partitions. They've increased those radiuses. So in a number of places, we had things like paper towel dispensers, garbage cans that hang on the wall that impeded those turning radiuses, which, so on the surface, you could say that they are not ADA compliant. We simply just started moving things. Now, they wanted to do an ADA audit with this, but they wanted additional fees. I think that doing an ADA audit is something that you will hear me talk about when we get into budget work sessions. It was on my plan anyways because of the regulation changes in 2018. Where you fall when it comes to ADA is, starting in 1990 is when they really started enforcing and having actual ADA regulations. All of our major facilities were built after that. So they meet ADA standards. We're not in violation of anything, but that doesn't mean that some of the new changes that have happened, we shouldn't take into consideration. So an ADA audit was on my radar prior to this, and we'll talk about that in budget work sessions. And in any work that we do in any of the buildings will have to meet the new ADA standards anyways, so they would be addressed. But I just wanted to talk about it because it's mentioned a whole lot in here. So, but to know that most of them are very minor and they've already been corrected because it was just placement of certain items had to be moved because the radius was increased. So move the garbage can to a different wall or move the paper towel dispenser to a different area. So, all right. So priority, I was really wanting to come out of here with a rough idea of what 1 and number 2 priorities would be. Everything that we've looked at and talked about today. My thoughts, I think priority 1 and this is just because of it's not, it's not that I like somebody better than anybody else. Love you all. I think we need to do something with that county attorney space because we commandeered that space from Port Operations almost 3 years ago. And on the surface, it looks like we've done nothing with it. It's been talked about in budget work sessions at least 2 different times, and we've chose to delay it most recently for this space needs assessment. Now, yes, the county attorney's office is fully utilizing all that space, but in a horrifically inefficient manner. So given the fact that we've taken that over, it sits there, we've made it work, we've had to put up temporary offices that have turned into semi-permanent walls. You know, we've split a conference room in half because there's no way to access the areas that we took over. You have to go outside. And now you've got that issue with trying to keep separation between county attorney operations and the court operations, because I mean, that's just, we need to maintain that. Well, we've muddied that water even more because now we have, you know, attorney staff that actually sit in offices that are right off the hallway for court personnel. So that would be where I would start as my priority number 1. Priority number 2 would be seriously looking at what it's going to take to digitize our files so we have an idea on what that looks like, what we have to keep for permanent hard records, because that can drive a lot of projects at the administration building. So,
I guess I expect you to say number 2 is storage.
yes,
So
for me
I would
personally,
put
I
digitize
agree,
and
but
storage.
yeah, so I mean, I could, you know, for me, you know, it would be number 1 priority, storage in my book, but I'm trying to look at this whole big plan. You know, the sheriff's right. He's got stuff all over the county, and getting it centrally located is a high priority.
Well, just the idea that you have to move things.
Yes,
to
and
get
for me
to
as
it.
well, and its location, but I'm just, the only reason I don't put it at number 2 is because I think that digitizing our files and knowing what we need for that physical file space drives so many other projects here at the administration building. So that's why I put it number 2.
I think that's very wise because when we were looking at this first, I went around a lot of places and I found a whole lot of things that we have paper copies of that we don't need. And some of that's now going, but I wonder, I don't know what the sheriff has and he's renting space for, but maybe if those things can be digitized and aren't permanent records,
And
you know,
and
that's what we got to know because we have a lot of space. that's
and
devoted
plus
to file storage.
there's a big component to digitizing files as well outside of the offsite for the sheriff's office. They have a lot, and they've been diligently getting it done without additional cost to the taxpayers, and they're gone. But there's a couple of large rooms at the Justice Center in the sheriff's office that they've been working on. You know, they use volunteers to do it, and so that also rolls into stuff at the Justice Center. You know, I think every office and department has some level of digitizing that could dictate what we can do with the space. So
what would the next step be? What's the relationship between this study and the CIP?
well, we need to know timeline on this. If we can get a priority, then the next step is when. Because that's where the dollar amounts come into play. That dictates when we can do some of these. And then that's when we start piecing this into the CIP. So I wanted priority today, and then the next go round, we can talk about the overall timeline. But I think prioritizing is where we need to start.
I agree with the county attorney's space being first priority because it's an internal remodel for one thing. Something that has just kind of grown as to fill the need without a lot of planning. I see 20 individual offices. How long is that going to last? How long is that going to be good for? 10. Got 20 individual offices in this plan. How many of those will all of those be occupied the moment this is remodeled?
Yes.
So you're asking, does this allow for any growth?
That's what I'm asking, because I'm looking at this space and I'm saying, you know, where would we go after this? And I don't know if you see your office growing. I think that Scott has said the filings aren't going up in this area. Is that correct?
Down about 21%.
Down 21%. So if that's any indication, I'd be hopeful that this would hold us a while, but I don't know how long a trend that is either, and where you see it going.
Or on the county attorney's office as well. My other question would be, since it would be an internal thing, is would you also want to look at the server room at the HCS building?
Yeah, I think, like, as we talked, Barb's gonna discuss this discussions for next FY. And I think that we would be wise to probably go ahead and work on that. You know,
I don't disagree with digitalizing.
Yeah. The server, increasing the size of the server room at HSC needs to happen whether we digitize
right.
everything or not. Yes, now, that's why we kind of went 3 times the size, so that if we have a whole lot more digital storage, we have to find space for, we hope to accommodate it. The big thing is making it a backup to
Mhm.
the server room here.
Right. I
Which-
think that's really
which-
crucial.
Theoretically, double the size, we could make it happen, but if we triple it, then it gives us some room for future growth and the ability to actually physically, because Barb's, you can't even hardly stand in the one there
So
now.
does that need to be priority?
Well, I think that it's not high priority in the space needs assessment, in my eyes, because I feel we're gonna accomplish it next fiscal year, just in normal budget practices. That's why it's
Okay.
not, that makes sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not saying that it's not high priority. I think it's very high priority.
Right.
But I feel that we're going to, the server
Do it
room
anyway.
piece at HSC is gonna happen. So,
Gotcha.
So county attorneys remodel and digitizing records as the top 2 priorities.
mhm.
And
Understanding
storage
that,
is-
and then storage,
2B.
yeah, I'm with you on, we have 2 number 2s. We'll go 2A and 2B.
Uh-huh.
And then that, I feel a lot of, the rest of it kind of hinges on what we get from, that way we plan on, we can start talking about and deep into, okay, what we can digitize, what we can digitize and destroy, and then really understand what we need for physical space to house what we got to keep.
I wouldn't, yeah, and then, not just records, honestly.
Yeah.
I remember when we remodeled in our board of supervisors area, and you said, could we lose a few cabinets? We could lose half of those cabinets, and the stuff that was in them was total junk. I found Christmas ornaments, and I said, where are we keeping Christmas ornaments?
Yeah.
In space that can be used for this or that. So I'm just gonna say, I think every place needs to look at how they're using their space.
Yes. And we also need to keep in mind that, don't look at it solely as we can digitize and destroy. We can. Some of those things we are going to want to keep. I think just because we can get rid of them doesn't mean we should or are going to. So that, but we kind of, right now, I have a rough idea. I've spoken to most everybody about what they have and what that would look like, but not to the level where we really know what that physical space would look like once we free up some of the other space. So. Okay.
Joby, you did a good job of going through.
Thanks. Everybody did a good job. We kept on course, and I think gave them a chance to talk. We got some input that we needed, you know, so we have a little better understanding. You know, we still got more questions than we got answers for, but we're moving down the right path. So now I can focus knowing what we got for 1 and 2, and then kind of plan for how our next week goes. But
So what's the things that are included in this plan and cost estimates? I came up with about $12 million, kind of looking at the top
yeah,
numbers.
it's a little over 12 mil total. If we tried to
12
just,
mil, and that
boom.
does not include some of the things that the sheriff brought up.
correct, and it doesn't accurately depict storage. They mention it, but they don't really address it.
No,
So-
pointed to that.
So that's why I wanted some rough numbers, but, and also, you know, that I'm looking at some options so we can talk about it once I have more. So,
Well, that's one reason I was asking, and I knew roughly when some of the buildings were built. This building's 56 years old, and we've done good maintenance on it, and folks have done a good job, and it's in very, very good shape, and it's worth the investment to keep it going. You know, and looking at Justice Center, I think it could have been done differently in the beginning to be a little more functional, but we have it where it is now, so let's deal with some of the things that aren't functional right now and try to make them more functional for everyday operations. I think that's gonna be a big.
it's gonna be a big one. That's gonna be,
Yeah.
and then, you know,
But
and because you're on that point, Linda, so I want to add on to it so people can keep this in their mind, you know, outside of just you three. There are things that we are going to do in the immediate future that we will probably, you know, undo as we move through this whole thing. But that's one of my things for doing this is perpetually we've put a lot of things on hold because it's like, well, maybe we can incorporate this, or we're going to do this down the road that we could do that. And so a lot of things that need to happen have just stalemated to where, yes, there might be, you know, there might be things that we do now in this current permanent front counter barriers project that potentially could be redone or undone depending on what we do with this building moving forward. But trying to understand that we're just getting started on something that's going to take probably realistically a decade. And that's if nothing changes. And we know that as we move through this, you know, operational changes are going to happen. Technology could drive different ways of doing things, which could change this whole plan. But we got to start moving some of these things forward. So
Appreciate all the work on this, Jody.
thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're getting there.
For you.
It's a lot of hours in it, but
Yeah.
in the end, it's worth it. So,
Yeah. Well, thank
Okay.
you.
well, thank you.
We are done.
Okay.